Hi, I'm Paul Arthur. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. It was a tight race in an historic federal election, resulting in a new Prime Minister for Canada. Plus, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre not only loses the election, but loses his own riding seat, but pledges to remain on as party leader. And things couldn't have gone much worse for the federal NDP, with a massive collapse in voter support, resulting in the resignation of party leader Jagmeet Singh.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. The shape of the next Liberal government is still unclear following an historic election day in Canada. Canadians are just waiting to find out whether Mark Carney's Liberals have won a majority or minority mandate. Elections Canada decided early this morning to pause the marathon counting of special ballots, with a handful of ridings still too close to call. Right now, the Liberal tally is 169 seats, 4 short of a majority. Elections Canada estimated that the uncounted votes could affect the result in about a dozen ridings. Prime Minister Carney pledged last night to unite a divided country.
As we come here after this most consequential election, let's put an end to the division and anger of the past. We are all Canadian, and my government will work for and with everyone. I began with humility, but Canadians are ambitious. And now, more than ever, it is a time for ambition. It is a time to be bold, to meet this crisis with overwhelming positive force of a united Canada. Because we are going to build, baby, build.
Carney is expected to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump soon, with plans to begin talks on a new trade and security pact. The American leader loomed large over the federal election campaign, with his tariff threats and repeated calls for Canada to become a U.S. state. The White House says Trump could sign an executive order sometime today that will give some tariff relief to the auto industry. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre not only lost the federal election yesterday, but he has also lost his Ottawa area seat, which he's held since 2004, to Liberal candidate Bruce Fanjoy by a margin of almost 4,000 votes. However, Poilievre did share in his concession speech last night that he plans to remain as party leader.
I want to thank my Conservative team, my caucus, my members of the Conservative staff and others who've helped reshape the entire political landscape in this country. Conservatives have achieved major breakthroughs tonight. We brought in record support from blue-collar and unionized workers, youth, new Canadians. We gave voices to countless people across this country who've been left out and left behind for far too long. We won the big debates of our time on the carbon tax, on inflation, on housing, on the drug crisis, on crime. Conservatives have been leading the debate, and we will continue to put forward the best arguments to improve the lives of our people right across this country. But we will not stop there. Every single day, our Conservative caucus and I will be holding the government to account on behalf of the millions of Canadians who believed in the message of change.
Time will tell if there will be any internal party pressure for Poilievre to resign, or if he will run in a by-election in another riding. A major part of the federal election story is the collapse of the NDP, who look likely to lose official party status, finishing with less than 7% of the overall vote and dropping off from 24 seats down to only 7 seats. Jagmeet Singh also lost his own seat in Burnaby Central, finishing in 3rd spot. In his speech to supporters last night, Singh said he will be stepping down as party leader as soon as an interim leader is appointed.
Obviously, I'm disappointed that we could not win more seats, but I'm not disappointed in our movement. I'm hopeful for our party. I know that we will always choose hope over fear and optimism over despair and unity over hate. New Democrats literally built this country. You Democrats built this country. We have built the best of Canada, and we aren't going anywhere. Thank you. Thank you so much. Love you all. You're amazing.
More than 19.2 million people cast a ballot in this federal election. Elections Canada says that represents more than 67% of eligible voters. While it didn't surpass the 79.4% record set back in the 1950s, votes are still being counted, so voter turnout does yet have some room to climb. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith released a statement today congratulating Mark Carney on his election win, but then minced no words, laying out her expectations for the future. As Premier, I invite the Prime Minister to immediately commence working with our government to reset the relationship between Ottawa and Alberta with meaningful action rather than hollow rhetoric. A large majority of Albertans are deeply frustrated that the same government that overtly attacked our provincial economy, also unabated for the past 10 years, has been returned to government. As Premier, I will not permit the status quo to continue. Albertans are proud Canadians that want this nation to be strong, prosperous, and united, but we will no longer tolerate having our industries threatened and our resources landlocked by Ottawa. Smith also thanked Pierre Poilievre for his work as Conservative leader and making Alberta's energy sector a cornerstone of his campaign, calling him a friend of Alberta. Meanwhile, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says he looks forward to working with Mark Carney's Liberals to meet a crucial moment for the province and for Canada. He's calling on Carney to make good on promises to help tear down internal trade barriers and speed up approvals for resource development projects. Ford also says he wants to focus on unity. He's refusing to shoot back at comments coming from Conservative MP Jamil Javani, who called the Premier a problem and an opportunist. The Bowmanville-Oshawa North MP said in an interview with CBC yesterday that Ford inserted himself into the federal campaign and Conservatives should not be taking advice from him. Ford would not take Giovanni's bait in the wake of Pierre Poilievre's loss, saying only that all Canadians have to unite against the real threat, which is the economic harm that will be caused by Trump's tariffs. At the time of this newscast, there are still a number of ridings still undecided, and there are also some unhappy campers in Alberta. To talk more about this is our political commentator, Brian Lilly with the Toronto Sun, who gives us his thoughts. Not only a loss for the Conservatives, but Pierre Poilievre himself losing his seat to Liberal candidate Bruce Fanjoy. Now, Brian, you've lived in Ottawa for years, and you know that riding and Poilievre very well. So how surprised are you at this?
Very surprised. I used to live right on the border of that riding. Pierre Poilievre was my MP when he was first elected. Boundaries have changed, though, and that's part of it. So you've got a few things going on. Boundaries of the riding have changed, a bit more of a suburban demographic moving in the western part of the riding. You had a big push by the Liberals to win. You had this swing among voters towards Mark Carney. But I do have to give some credit to Bruce Fanjoy, who I have not met, but showed up 18 months to 2 years ago and said, I'm going to take down Pierre Poilievre, and I'm running to win. And I thought, okay, that's a lot of bravado. He put in the hard work. It obviously paid off. Ahead by thousands.
Wow. Yeah, that just totally surprised me. I thought, okay, if he's going to win, it's going to be narrow, squeaky, but no. Man. Okay, so what's next for Pierre Poilievre, by the way? I mean, he's saying he wants to stay on, right, so that he's got to get a seat, so there's going to be a by-election somewhere called, I guess, who's the sacrificial lamb here?
Well, hold on. There's a lot of possibilities here. Remember, the Conservatives, they adopted the Reform Act, which means the caucus can decide to remove the leader if they want. I don't think the grassroots will want to remove the leader, but is there a caucus revolt? There was a caucus revolt that helped push Erin O'Toole out and allow Pierre Poilievre to become leader, and a lot of Poilievre's key allies, including Alberta MPs like Shannon Stubbs and Chris Warkington, they were part of that. Is there going to be a different faction to try and push out Poilievre? We have to watch for that.
Oh, man.
So, we have to see, is there an ambitious MP somewhere that wants to say, you know what, you failed, I can do it. I don't think we're going to see a push from the outside from Ontario Premier Doug Ford or anything like that, but, because there's been lots of chatter about that. But there could be a push against Poilievre. I think that the party establishment is behind him. The grassroots is with him. We'll see how the rest plays out. But yeah, he could end up having to do a by-election somewhere. But if Carleton's not safe, where is?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, wow, okay. Mark Carney winning his seat right close to where Poilievre lost, so he'll be getting his seat in the House of Commons, and he's promising he's going to be standing firm against the Americans, but if it's only a minority, can he actually do that?
It's going to be more difficult for him. Look, I did not want a liberal government. I think anybody that's watched me over the years on Bridge City News understands that. But Canada needed a majority government, one way or the other, coming out of this election, because whoever is going to negotiate with Trump needs to show up with a position of strength. And what does Trump like to measure? Everything. And he's going to look and he's going to say, you don't have a mandate. You don't have the cards. You only have a minority. The people aren't with you. Those are the sorts of things that Trump will be doing with Carney now that he is the prime minister and is going to be heading to Washington or engaging in negotiations.
Yeah, he's a smart cookie. So I think you're probably right. He'll use all of those things to his advantage to try to get some leverage over Canada, over Carney, and so forth. So we'll have to keep an eye out on how Trump handles this with the minority. And of course, with the election over, I guess we got to get back to business here. So when does Parliament return? And will we see some quick government action on some of those key promises?
One thing we're going to have to see quick government action on is a budget. So expect the budget before the end of June. So it takes about 2 weeks at least for the writs to be returned and certified. After that, you can have a swearing in, you can have cabinet appointed. But 60 days after the writs are returned, you have to pass a budget. The government has been not passed a money bill since last December. They were scheduled to run out of money on March 31st, but because the election was called, the government runs on what's called special warrants. And I know some people got really angry during the election saying, look, all this spending's just been approved. The government's not even sitting. That's just standard, already approved spending that's allowed to continue at the same rate. And that's what that was. But that ends 60 days after the end of the election, which is in about 2 weeks' time when the results are certified. So we've got to have a budget passed by the middle of July. I expect it will be done sometime in June. And Poilievre had said he would make the MPs sit over the summer in the House of Commons. We'll see if Carney does that, or does he prefer governing without supervision of members of Parliament?
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to see. Okay. I mean, he loves big government. I mean, and that seems obvious, so we'll see what happens. Liberals thinking they might make a breakthrough in Alberta. That did not happen. So anything, Carney could do to kind of, he's saying, okay, I want to represent all voters, from across the country and so forth. Alberta, a bit of a tough job, huh?
Yeah, well, with Alberta growing to 37 seats from 34, there was talk, oh, maybe some of those other ones, they're urban. Maybe they'll go to the NDP. Well, that didn't happen. Maybe they'll go to the Liberals. Liberals stuck with 2, which is what they had before, 1 in Edmonton, 1 in Calgary. Now, what could Carney do? He could say, look, these 5 demands from the energy sector, these demands from Premier Smith, yes, I'm not going to give you all of them. I'm not going to give you everything you want, but there's something here that we can find agreement on. He could get rid of the emissions cap. Unfortunately, he's defended that. He could get rid of the industrial carbon tax. The things he needs to do, I think he has to go against type. He has to go against where he has been campaigning from to show good faith. We'll see if he can do that. That would be true leadership. It would annoy people within his party, but it is the right thing to do for national unity, which is something I'm very much concerned about at the moment.
Oh, for sure. I mean, how is, Premier Danielle Smith going to respond to this? Doesn't sound, like she's terribly excited about a Mark Carney government, and we will likely see a big push from the independence movement, right?
Yeah, look, I think most of polling shows most Albertans want to stay in Canada, but you also want respect, and you haven't been getting respect from Ottawa for a long time. This guy says he's a Westerner. Well, show it. Show some respect, and that means putting some water in his wine, not yours.
All right. right. Well, of course, the NDP, a big story here. Man, you know, I mean, what a collapse. Jagmeet Singh, of course, giving up the leadership here. And so we'll see what happens, who takes it over and that sort of thing. But, I mean, less than 10% of the popular vote. This was, was it worse than you thought it would be?
Yes, if the NDP had gotten up to 9–10%, that would have really helped the Conservatives with some of these vote splits. I'll give you an idea. Here in Ontario, the Conservatives got 44% of the popular vote. That in a normal election gets you a supermajority. That's more than Doug Ford got in the Ontario provincial election, and he won 80 seats. So, but the NDP collapsed down to 4.9%, and the Liberals were just ahead of the Conservatives in the popular vote, but they took 60% of the seats in the province. So, it's those vote splits. Had the NDP been a bit higher, the Conservatives they wouldn't have won the most seats in Ontario, but they might have won a lot more, and they might be the ones forming the minority government at the moment. All of these things are factors that nobody really foresaw. Nobody saw the NDP going down to 1% of the vote in Carleton, where Pierre Poilievre lost his seat. BC is normally an NDP stronghold. They've only got 3 seats there. Ontario, they used to have 5. They've got 0. They kept 1 in Alberta. And for a good chunk of last night, that was the only seat the NDP was leading or elected, and it was in Alberta. That was funny to watch, but total and utter collapse of the party, and most of that vote falling in behind Mark Carney and the Liberals. And it's tough to compete against that when you look at the results that the Conservatives were able to bring about in so much of the country.
Whoever inherits that leadership job he's got a lot of work ahead of him or her. Majority, minority, still up for grabs. So, if it is minority, will we see the Conservatives dance with the bloc and potentially bring Carney's government down at some point? I'm running out of time here, but how long do you think this minority government, if that's what it is, will last, I guess?
I'm the NDP's broke, so they don't want to do anything. The Bloc's happy that they got 24 seats. People always project very short minorities. I've been covering them since 2004. I don't see a very short minority. We're probably in it for a year minimum, possibly 2.
Okay, year or 2. All right. Thank you so much, Brian. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
As we're here in Alberta, one of the many ridings to remain blue is right here in Lethbridge, with long-standing MP Rachel Thomas securing her 4th term in Ottawa. Her victory was celebrated with a crowd of supporters at the Paradise Canyon Golf Resort on Monday. BCN's Landon Hickok has more on that story.
In her speech to supporters on Monday night, shortly after learning the results, Rachel Thomas told her supporters to not shrink back following early calls of a federal Liberal election win. Thomas was re-elected as Member of Parliament with nearly 61% of the 66,000 votes from the Lethbridge riding, with over 40,000 voters expressing their support. Thomas expressed that she tries to remain transparent and accountable, and it has won the people's trust.
I've done my best to make myself available to the constituents of Lethbridge, and I think this election shows that people are overall very pleased with the representation that I offer. I'll continue to offer that strength. I'll continue to make sure that I'm an effective voice for them in our nation's capital, Ottawa. I try to be as transparent as possible so that folks can hold me accountable, and I hear from constituents that they appreciate that.
Despite large gains across the country, the federal Conservatives once again find themselves as the official opposition. But Thomas says they are confident that they will continue to do their job effectively.
I think in those places where Carney stole our platform, I think there's opportunity to collaborate. But on most issues, we're quite far apart in terms of the Conservatives and the Liberals and our way of seeing things in the country. I think going forward, as we step into our role as the official opposition, clearly we're going to have to find other parties to work with. As of right now, it looks like the Bloc Québécois is the party that we're ultimately going to have to figure out, a relationship with going forward if we're going to be effective in terms of stopping government legislation or effective in holding them accountable. And so, in the days and weeks and months ahead, we're going to have to navigate that relationship and see what that holds for us.
Blaine Higgin, the mayor of Lethbridge, congratulated Thomas on the win, saying that he and council are eager to continue working with her to ensure Lethbridge's priorities are met. She was first elected to Ottawa, representing Lethbridge since 2015.
You know, to have the opportunity to represent Lethbridge for a fourth term is ultimately just such an honor and a joy. I really look forward to it.
For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
Elsewhere, Lethbridge's Liberal candidate, Chris Spearman, held his own election watch gathering at the Southern Alberta Ethnic Association. He said his campaign gave its all in order to give Lethbridge a candidate that can work directly with the elected federal Liberals.
You know, it was always going to be a challenge to overcome the big blue bale of hay in terms of people that traditionally vote Conservative, and we gave it our best shot to make sure that we tried to transmit our views and say it would be in the best interest of Lethbridge to have a member of Parliament in the governing party. We've gone 10 years without a member of Parliament in the governing party, and it hasn't really served us well. So in order for those views to get done, for Lethbridge to be heard, we need to make sure that we elect people who will have an ear in Ottawa.
7 people remain hospitalized in critical condition after the vehicle ramming attack at the Lapu Lapu Day Festival in Vancouver on Saturday. The attack left 11 people dead and 30-year-old Kai G. Adam Lowe facing 8 counts of second-degree murder. Vancouver Police Sergeant Steve Addison says there could be more charges laid, and he also shared more information about the accused.
I can confirm that Kai G. Lowe did have contact with the police in a neighboring jurisdiction on April 25th, the day before the vehicle attack. That contact was not criminal in nature, and it did not rise to the level where mental health intervention was required. Beyond that, I'm not prepared to disclose additional information at this time. I can tell you a little bit more information about the 11 people who have now died. 9 of them are women, 2 of them are men. They reside in various communities in Metro Vancouver. There is one person who has died, who we don't know where they specifically where they live, and we have identified them, but we have not confirmed their residence.
More information has become available on this case as Vancouver Coastal Health has confirmed that the accused was under the care of a mental health team and had been granted extended leave from the hospital in accordance with the Mental Health Act. BC Premier David Eby says he'll call a public inquiry into the deadly vehicle ramming if the criminal case doesn't give answers the community is looking for. Eby says his government would call an inquiry right now if it weren't for the police investigation and upcoming criminal trial. Here in Lethbridge, the Filipino community is also expressing its grief over what happened. On May 1st, an event will be held in the city of Lethbridge to support and offer prayers for the victims' families and friends. Vince Pacheco shares the details about the upcoming memorial event.
Light and vigil mass that will happen in Lethbridge City Hall, hosting that event. It's a prayer vigil mass to mourn and give prayers to the families, and I'm sure we will pass the hat to give financial support or whatever type of support that the Filipino community, and I'm sure not only the Filipinos, we are inviting the rest of the Lethbridge, Alberta community to join us for this specific event. I felt devastated, one, because being a Filipino and part of a Filipino community in Canada, I know it was more of a festivity, family affair, and nobody would realize, be an experience to all the people who attended that event, the Lapu Lapu event in Vancouver, Canada. I think it was just a random happening wherein, unfortunately, there are a lot of Filipinos that was hurt and killed in that event.
Lapu Lapu is a Filipino hero who fought against the Spanish during the colonization period in the 1960s. Taber residents likely noticed increased police activity today. Alberta law enforcement response teams, also known as ALERT, conducted an organized crime investigation called Project Leadline. Search warrants were executed today at various locations in Taber. ALERT says arrests and seizures are ongoing, with more information expected to be released at a later date. If you suspect drug or gang activity in your community, you can call local police or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS. The Lethbridge wastewater treatment plant is operating normally again following a contamination scare. Yesterday, the city reported a significant level of contamination of what appeared to be vegetable oil. That overloaded the facility's processing capabilities, putting extra strain on the system that treats water before returning it to the Old Man River. Staff installed containment booms on the river to minimize any risk of spillover. The city says crews monitored the situation overnight and no oil entered the waterway. Lethbridge City Council has approved this year's property tax rates, and residents will soon be receiving their tax notices. Council approved a 5.1% hike as outlined in the city's 2023 to 2026 operational budget. It will generate $192 million in revenues, up $11 million from 2024. Of every dollar on each resident's property tax bill, 75 cents goes towards the city operating budget, 24 cents is for Alberta Education, and 1 cent is for the Green Acres Foundation. Drivers in Lethbridge should be aware of some traffic disruptions downtown over the next week. Starting today, there will be a series of partial and full road closures on 6th Street South between 5th Avenue and 4th Avenue to allow for the addition of new on-street parking stalls. There will be a partial closure northbound with through traffic still allowed, and there will be a brief full closure of the road on May 2nd and then another full closure during paving on May 5th. The work is anticipated to be completed by Tuesday, May 6th, weather permitting. A Lethbridge area farmer was arrested recently, allegedly for a dispute over egg production. His daughter, Lindsay Van Essen, posted on Facebook stating he was arrested because Alberta egg farmers don't like the fact that he can sell inspected eggs to people without paying millions into their quota system. BCN contacted the Manager of Public Affairs with Egg Farmers of Alberta, or EFA, David Webb, who shares more details on the situation for us, saying that Mr. Van Essen was not arrested directly for egg production.
Was arrested by the RCMP because he'd been found in civil contempt of court for refusing to comply with multiple court orders and to appear in court as ordered. Basically, anytime an unregulated farmer is brought to our attention that they're not following the rules, the first thing we do is just reach out to let them know what the law says here in Alberta. And in most cases, people just aren't aware of it. And so, whether that means, reducing the number of hens that they raise, changing the way that they sell their eggs, people are happy to do that. Despite involvement from us, from the Alberta Agriculture, he just stated that he didn't care what the law was. He didn't care what the rules were. And he even, as far as I'm aware, built a barn that would hold upwards of, I've heard 3,000 to 5,000 birds. I mean, so that's at least an order of 10 magnitude more than what the law says. In order to produce eggs commercially, you must own quota. For the egg industry, 1 unit of quota equals 1 laying hen. Our provincial allotment of quota is currently divided by more than 170 farms. Here in Alberta, you're actually allowed to raise up to 300 egg-laying hens without requiring quota. Also, for those people, they're allowed to sell their eggs as well. So an ungraded egg, for example, cannot be sold commercially. You can't sell an ungraded product to a restaurant or to a grocery store. It has to be to an individual for their own personal use.
BCN also reached out to Lindsay Van Essen, but we were not yet able to receive a reply. Some news today from the Bronx Zoo in New York. It announced that the first king vulture chick to hatch at the facility in 3 decades is now being fed, but in a rather unique way. Ornithologists are using a hand puppet made to look like a mother vulture to feed the baby. The puppet was designed by the zoo's Exhibition and Graphic Arts Department and is designed to prevent the baby bird from imprinting on its human caretakers. This technique was pioneered more than 40 years ago when hand-raising Andean condor chicks using a similar hand puppet cleverly designed to mimic an adult bird. We need to take a short break, but we'll be right back with a full forecast. A warm trend continuing, nothing but double-digit temperatures in store for us. Details ahead.
Our 7-day forecast has it with a high of 17 for today with a chance of showers. Tomorrow is looking to have partly cloudy skies with a high of 16, and Thursday is looking to have a high of 19 with sunny skies. Friday is going to have a high of 26 with sunny skies, and Saturday is going to have a high of 28 with sunny skies. Sunday is looking to have a chance of showers with a high of 16, and Monday is going to have a high of 22 with partly cloudy skies. Today's almanac has us with an average high of 16 for this time of year and a low of 2. The record high on this day was set back in 1939 with 29, and the low was set back in 1909 with minus 13. The sun rose at 6:12 a.m. today and set at 8:46 p.m. Our national forecast has Vancouver and Victoria with sunny skies, with Victoria getting a high of 18 and Vancouver of 15. Edmonton and Calgary both share highs of 16 with partly cloudy skies. The rest of the prairies have Saskatoon with a high of 18, Regina with a high of 17 and sunny skies, and Winnipeg's looking to have a chance of showers with a high of 17. Central Canada is going to have nice sunny skies with Toronto having a high of 13, and both Ottawa and Montreal having highs of 12. Onto the East Coast, we're looking to get some showers with Fredericton getting a high of 16, Halifax getting a high of 19, and Charlottetown a high of 14. And finishing off the national forecast with St. John's, we're looking at those chances of showers with a high of 12.
Economists say a minority parliament could prompt higher deficits amid party compromises. With the Liberal Party appearing poised to form a minority government, one economist says the big question is who will partner with the new Liberal government to pass legislation. Chief economist Beata Caranci says that's especially true when it comes to potential trade-related bills influenced by renewed negotiations with the Trump administration. A CIBC chief economist says gaining support in Parliament from either the NDP or the Bloc could mean allocating additional funds towards those parties' priorities. The president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says small business confidence is near record lows as a new government takes office amid a trade war with the United States. Dan Kelly says the group is forecasting an extremely difficult second quarter for the Canadian economy. Kelly says now that there is a degree of political clarity, the government needs to turn its attention to reducing taxes, cutting red tape, and providing much-needed economic certainty. The United Steelworkers Union is urging the government to prioritize workers across the country, those looking for action to protect and create good union jobs, rebuild industrial base, and ensure fairness and security for working people. Amazon has launched its first batch of internet satellites into orbit. The United Launch Alliance's Atlas V rocket carried 27 of Amazon's Project Kuiper satellites into orbit after 2 test satellites were launched in 2023. Once released in orbit, the satellites will eventually reach an altitude of almost 630 kilometers. It's the latest entry in the mega constellation market that is currently dominated by thousands of SpaceX Starlinks. Having kids is more expensive than ever, with inflation, housing, and the cost of living all in play. Statistics Canada says the average cost of raising children is nearing $300,000, which only accounts for the first 17 years of life. Despite the costs, experts say younger people thinking about starting a family shouldn't be dissuaded. One expert says many families successfully raise children on modest budgets by prioritizing needs over wants and being intentional with spending. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 75 points on the day to finish at 24,874. The Dow is up 300 to 40,527. The S&P 500 was up 32 points to 5,560, and the Nasdaq was up 95 to 17,461. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 191 to $60.14 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to $3.38 US. Gold was down 20.77 to $33.16.77 US an ounce. Silver was down 19 cents to $32.92 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.90 per bushel, barley is at $6.99, canola is at $15.44, and corn is at $8.20 per bushel. Live cattle were up 70 cents to $216.35. Feeder cattle May contract was up $2.22 to $294.02, and lean hogs May contract was down 40 to $92.55. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 72.30 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Mark Carney's Liberals have won the federal election, likely with a minority mandate, as vote counting continues. Pierre Poilievre not only lost the election, but also lost his own riding. He is, however, planning on staying on as leader. Not so, though, with Jagmeet Singh. He will resign as party leader after the NDP finished with only 7 seats. Now that Mark Carney has a mandate from Canadians, how will he approach the tariff challenges with Donald Trump? And what do Carney's policies spell out for the Canadian economy? Economist Dr. Trevor Tombe chats with us about that next. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews. With the federal election producing a 4th straight mandate for the Liberals, but with a new leader, how will this impact our Canadian economy? Joining us to discuss this is Dr. Trevor Tombe. He is a professor at the University of Calgary's Department of Economics and the Director of Fiscal and Economic Policy at the School of Public Policy. Good to have you with us, Trevor.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, lots to talk about. Much of this election, of course, focused on how to stand up to the U.S. and the tariffs, and that includes the auto sector big time, right? So what do you think? Is the federal government going to be spending some big tax dollars to, well, subsidize essentially, right, like they did with the pandemic?
Well, the trade war with the United States doesn't just feature U.S. tariffs on Canadian exports, and certainly that's a big challenge for many sectors in Canada, but it also included our retaliation. This provided for what the Parliamentary Budget Office and what both the Liberal and the Conservative parties were budgeting for of about $20 billion in revenue this year. Now, tariffs are taxes, and these are taxes that Canadians pay, but it does provide the federal government with the ability to provide some income support to maybe displaced workers, maybe providing some assistance to different companies to get through the trade war with the United States. And so those short-term challenges, I'd say fiscally for the federal government, quite manageable just because of the additional revenues from tariffs. Where I think the election raised a number of bigger questions economically was that both parties correctly identified, a really massive challenge that we've been neglecting for many years. That's slow productivity growth, slow economic growth, weak investment levels, and both parties pointed to that as a problem. Even the Liberal platform saying that a change of course is desperately needed. And the two parties differed in terms of how they wanted to approach that, with the Conservatives favoring more of a market-oriented approach to boost growth, and Liberals really wanting to expand the size and scope of the federal government to move the needle on growth. And so I think we'll see what happens next in terms of what the government has planned, because in a minority situation, they might be constrained in terms of what policies they actually feel like they can pursue, which is potentially problematic, and that some of the more important policies like infrastructure across the country, rail, port, pipelines, and more, that might be politically challenging, and a minority government might not be able to execute in the same way that a majority government could have.
And that could also even impact how Donald Trump continues, his policies toward Canada, if it's a minority or a majority. I'm thinking, yeah, he's pretty smart that way, so he'll manipulate whatever he can to their advantage, right?
Potentially, and that's especially important not just because of the kind of trade war, taxes on steel and aluminum and autos, and maybe broader tariffs on other goods, but the review that will soon occur about the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement, What are the demands that the U.S. puts on the table in terms of any potential renegotiation of that agreement? Might very well be different in a minority situation than a majority. And interestingly, the Canadian government's ability to actually reach an agreement on certain sensitive issues might be constrained. I'm thinking in particular around market access for dairy and supply management. If there was a majority government, then the ability to agree to potentially unpopular concessions, um, might exist in a way that might be really hard for minorities. So, a lot of interesting potential developments to see how we navigate this.
Okay. Lots of talk, of course, about tearing down provincial trade barriers. So, and again, I'm not sure if the minority, Parliament would be affected by this as well. But are they going to come down? I mean, these things don't happen overnight, right?
No, they do not. And we did have a commitment from Mr. Carney last night that his strong desire to create, as he calls it, one economy, not 13, is something that he wants to achieve by Canada Day. I'd say that's overly ambitious, a little ambitious. So I'm sure they'll do something in the short term, no doubt, but interprovincial barriers are largely about regulatory restrictions, certifications, and standards and credentials being different from one province to the next. And overcoming that involves provinces choosing to kind of recognize each other's rules and regulations. And this is really interesting because a lot of provincial governments have taken steps in that direction. It's something that the Alberta government is also in favor of, at least in principle. So can we get agreement broadly between provincial governments? That'll be really interesting. Canada's really decentralized. The federal government cannot just unilaterally move here. But there's a lot of important economic benefits from harmonizing these rules and regulations. I think of it more as cutting red tape, easing regulatory burden, make it easier for firms to operate across the country and buy and sell from each other. And also, a potential opportunity to show that Canada's various governments, regardless of political stripe, can work together to help boost investment and growth.
Love to see it if it happens. So let's talk carbon tax. Of course, consumer portion reduced to zero, but it's still there. All right. So I don't know. If a government decided, again, maybe more difficult to do with a minority government, but say, hey, let's start. We need to raise it up for whatever reason. They could. But the industrial carbon tax remains, right? And now again, it's being sold as, hey, just the big industrial polluters are going to be the ones paying it. But do you want to unpack that for us? I mean, the best as I can, tell, not being an economic expert, I'm thinking, though, that's going to get passed down to me, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. And this will vary by product. In some areas, it's easier to pass through cost increases to consumers. But yes, for the most part, I think it's entirely fair that the overwhelming majority of the carbon taxes paid by larger firms are passed through to consumers in the form of higher prices. Now, where we go from here on that policy, that'll be interesting to watch because most of the large emitter pricing systems are provincial rather than federal. So Alberta has one, Ontario, Quebec has a whole different system, British Columbia as well. So these are policies that maybe there's scope for some harmonization, think about an oil and gas firm in BC, in Alberta and Saskatchewan. It faces different regulatory requirements and different systems in each of those. So there might be scope for provinces to have some alignment in those systems, but it does appear as though they're here to stay.
Well, I mean, that can affect, of course, our business environment as well. I mean, we're seeing, of course, increased support, for a national energy corridor and pipeline from Alberta to Eastern Canada. Interestingly enough, I think it was a NANA survey here recently that said even if there were environmental and indigenous land claim concerns about the route, Canadians are still saying, let's build this thing, right? So, but, I mean, again, Carney has a very long track record of being, quite firm on his environmental plans, to protect the environment. And he's not said, I'm going to get rid of the, Bill C-69, that sort of thing. So what kind of business environment is there here for oil and gas investors?
That's a great question. I think the issues that are much more important for oil and gas is not actually the large emitter carbon pricing system. It's questions around infrastructure. It's questions around what happens to the federal emissions cap on oil and gas. That's a very big one. And so we're going to get very early indications around what the federal government's position is on actually becoming, as Mr. Carney has said, an energy superpower. This will require more infrastructure. It will require abandoning the oil and gas emissions cap. It will require potential increases in federal support for carbon capture. This is a way to lower emissions. It's something that the Alberta government's also kind of in favor of. So if there is a willingness on the part of the federal government to more quickly facilitate infrastructure construction, maybe not applying federal reviews to the projects, deferring to provincial governments, also an idea that Mr. Carney's put forward, and eliminating the oil and gas emissions cap, then I'd say that would be an improvement, a dramatic one in the business environment in oil and gas. So we'll see.
I'm out of time. Thanks so much for sharing your insight with us today, Trevor.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Here in Canada, we are in the aftermath of a federal election. Now, to hear her thoughts from a foreign perspective is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, the Canadian Liberal Party, led by Mark Carney, won last night's election. And one quote from Carney, and this is what he said April the 3rd in Ottawa. He goes and says, Canada is ready to take a leadership role in building a coalition of like-minded countries who share our values. Now, this is likely because Carney is going to start by expanding Canadian trade with Europe, Australia, and Asian democracies such as Japan. But do you feel his statement has some kind of new world order tones to it?
It does. And, it's interesting to watch the aftermath of your election to be framed as a either pro-Trump candidate or an anti-Trump candidate. What about Canada? I mean, are people really, and that's my question to Canadians, did you vote based on the candidate that was going to stand up to Trump or parallel Trump, or did you vote on the person who was going to take Canada in the better direction for the future? I do wish that we could do, kind of like a placebo effect and kind of hold this election in a vacuum. Had Donald Trump not expressed, 51st state sentiments and tariffs, etc. Which candidate would have won from the Canadian perspective of, changing directions in Canada? Is it that Canada just can't vote? This is the fourth, term for a liberal, administration that you're going to have. Is that all Donald Trump's fault? Would this have gone in a different direction had Donald Trump not expressed those things? It's very much interesting to watch now as Carney wants to be the Donald Trump, in the sense that he believes that he's going to switch world order. He's going to be the leader of this new idea, this new way forward. Now, months ago when Donald Trump won his election and was he had his inauguration in January, it was the opposite sentiment, that there would be a wave across the world, that there would be, right-wing candidates would become more popular and the pendulum would swing to the right. Now we're going to watch as perhaps as things are settling with the Trump administration, and obviously he's standing up to the rest of the world, how things are settling in different parts, and Canada perhaps being the first of those to show the way.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of Canadians may feel that after all the tariff concerns and these 51st state comments, after they settle, there could be some buyer's remorse with who they chose as a leader. Now, Carney has also warned that U.S. President Donald Trump is, quote, trying to break us, citing concerns over these 51st state comments, as well as our water and resources. Now, Carney appears to be talking tough now, but how do you see this relationship panning out with Trump?
Look, regardless of who would have become the Canadian leader, there has to be, some sort of reconciliation at some point. Now, if you and I were Carney, we would also use that to our advantage to say, I'm going to be the one to stand up to Trump. We're not going to take this. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And perhaps he won this election based on that positioning. But what will happen in the months to come is that, perhaps he will stand up to Trump, but at the end of the day, the two will have to work together. National security, securing the border, working together to bring these, the prosperity to all the different industries and all the different trade patterns and relationships that are in existence, and perhaps could be more than that if things settle the way that the Trump administration envisions them settling. The point being, regardless of what does happen, Carney will have to be a Canadian leader and not just the person who will stand up to Trump or sit down with Trump. And I think that is what Canadians have to deal with, grapple with, kind of accept in the days and months to come.
Now, still on Trump, he marked his 100th day in office. Now, many are pointing out this was the busiest first 100 days of any president in recent memory, with the commander-in-chief issuing a slew of executive orders and pursuing a litany of initiatives designed to radically overhaul the federal government. So let's hear a summary of what all he's been up to.
How much time do we have, Naveed? Look, a lot of people are happy with a lot of the proactive approach to ending wars and stopping terrorism and going after the schools that have the pro-Hamas protesters. A lot of that is getting positive grades this morning as we commemorate 100 days. There's also the economy that he's taking a proactive approach. But there's also a lot of uncertainty. So, with the tariffs, how is that going? We don't know. It's really a difficult time to give. It's almost like an interim, report card where you don't know where the final is going to be at. So you just can't give a grade right now. But I think a lot of people are kind of nervous about how this uncertainty will eventually settle. But we heard from BCN this morning, head of Treasury, that that gap, that uncertainty is going to be narrowing sooner rather than later. And I think that's a wonderful sign. I think it's going to be very positive. That you need to look no further than our stock market going up and down erratically based on the comments coming from the White House. There is a lot of uncertainty. So I think, let's talk on day 150 or 200, and then we'll see where things are going. But I think it's very difficult to give him a report card. I will say my focus is on foreign policy. A lot of good things are happening. We're going after the Houthis, we're giving designations, we're getting sanctions. The Iran deal, I'm uncertain about that, but I think that we're not going to settle for anything less than a real significant way of curbing the Iran regime.
Now, also within these first 100 days, the National Counterterrorism Center has identified nearly 1,200 alleged terrorists illegally in the U.S. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, and this is something, obviously the Canadians are our neighbors to the north, and we share in common is that, look, regardless of political party, love him or hate him, Trump is doing the right thing by stopping this flow of illegal migrants coming into the country because of all the nefarious actors that are coming in. There is no way to vet them. We know that they're already here. 1,200 is a significant number when you think about all the different bad actors and groups and associations and radicalized individuals that could be here, people who are members of gangs and terror groups and others. So I think it's very much a something that we should obviously collaborate on, is keeping our border safe, our southern border, our northern border. I know it's trickling up and trickling from our southern border, but into Canada as well. So something that we definitely want to keep our eye on and continue supporting is safe borders, and of course our national security measures that are actually picking out these individuals and getting them back, and getting them into prisons, by the way. So I think it's interesting to note the number of bad actors that are coming in.
Mm-hmm. Now, turning our eyes over to international news, a report says cash transfers from United Nations organizations to Gaza are actually being exploited by Hamas.
Yes, and this is not anything new, but this report is in fact new because there has been a new instance of this that has been unearthed. So basically, we know that the aid trucks that are going in for the Palestinians is being hoarded by Hamas officials, and then they're starving the people, or they're not getting them the medical need the medical supplies that they need, of course. And what do the international headlines say? That Israel or the United Nations or the United States has their fingers all over their fingerprints all over this, that the Palestinians are not getting X, Y, and Z. Well, they're getting X, Y, and Z. It's just that they're under the leadership of Hamas and they cannot get those things. That's number one. Number two is anything that's coming from the United Nations. So it's either cash or aid or supplies or anything coming in. Even the workers, the UNRWA, which is the organization that is entrusted, it's a UN organization that is entrusted solely created to help the Palestinian cause. Members of UNRWA, meaning they were employed by the United Nations, were actually part of the October 7th massacre. There are terrorists that are working for the United Nations and are trying to help. So there's a lot to really uncover here. But the point being, unless we get rid of these radical elements within the Palestinian people, within the leadership of Hamas, there is no way for a future of these people living side by side in that region.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.